Welcome to the Industry Experts panel at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com. My name is Michelle Holliday. Today, we are welcoming back to the show Mr. Alex Newman. Alex is the founder and president of Liberty Sentinel Media and a best-selling author. He is an international journalist, a contributor to the Epoch Times, the Law Enforcement Intelligence Brief, and the New American, among many, many others. He is also a director at G. Edward Griffin's Red Pill University, along with Robert Kiyosaki, Del Bigtree, Cynthia McKinney, and the list goes on with some of the most influential freedom seekers in the world. This is going to be an epic show because we are about to discuss the attempted coup upon our country, which is taking place right in front of our eyes. Alex, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's great to be with you.
We are thrilled to have you here. This is turning into probably one of the most important moments in the history of the United States. The president's attorney, Alex, Sidney Powell, has been confirming that they are about to release the Kraken. So we are headed for some very interesting things in motion. We want to start off with the fundamentals of what we know with certainty that took place in the United States 2020 presidential election. From your perspective, please lay out the whole picture for us.
Well, what happened was actually exactly what we predicted was going to happen. The deep state, as I call it, was trying to overthrow not just our elected president, but on a much more broader level, our constitutional Republican form of government and really the system of free elections, the system of individual self-government, the system of God-given rights protected by a government that was formed to protect these God-given rights. They want to destroy it all. And we warned that this election was going to be a major turning point. Donald Trump was too much of a threat to the agenda. And, that doesn't mean that I agree or that everybody should agree with all of his policies. In fact, I have some serious policy disagreements with him. But on things like globalism, which are an existential threat to the continued sovereignty and independence of this nation, and therefore a threat to the continued protection of our individual rights, Trump has been like a bull in a china shop. He's knocking down UN institutions, withdrawing from the World Health Organization, the Paris Agreement, the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It just was a mess from the globalist perspective. They had to stop him before the damage became irreversible. And so they laid out a plan. And again, we warned about this plan. They kind of outlined it in public. They created the Transition Integrity Project where they wargamed different scenarios. And literally the same people who were running these color revolutions in Eastern Europe over the last few decades were running a similar operation here in the United States. Now, vote fraud was a central element of that. We've always had vote fraud in this country. Even before we were, as corrupt as a nation as we are today, vote fraud still existed, especially locally in congressional races. Even back in the 1960s, there's a lot of evidence that there was election fraud that helped determine the presidential election. But what we're seeing here is unprecedented. As Trump's attorneys, Rudy Giuliani, these are serious people too. Rudy Giuliani was a former U.S. attorney, actually one of the top U.S. attorneys in the country. He was for the Southern District of New York, one of the most important jurisdictions. We had Sidney Powell, who of course was the lead counsel for General Michael Flynn, Trump's original national security advisor, who was persecuted by the deep state. And then also Lynn Wood, one of the top attorneys in the country. They're all saying we have evidence and proof of millions of fraudulent votes that were switched through the computers and so on. And then the second part of the operation was trying to control the narrative, trying to silence anybody who talks about this. So we've seen YouTube videos being pulled down right and left. We've seen I was actually put into Facebook jail immediately after posting an article from my website, libertysentinel.org, about election fraud. So there is an effort to control the narrative. This is critical to the color revolution process. And if they succeed, they will overthrow not just President Donald Trump using fraud. And they're saying this openly now, they intend to make it so that no Republican, no conservative will ever win again. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to legalize tens of millions of illegal immigrants who they know most of whom will be voting for Democrats. They want to pack the Senate with more Democrat senators by turning D.C. and Puerto Rico into states. So they want to make it a one-party state. They want to do to the United States what they've done to California. And ultimately, we will go down the route of Venezuela and Cuba and Zimbabwe if we continue pursuing this. So I think that's kind of the 40,000-foot view of what's going on, Michelle.
Right, right. The happenings are just crazy. It is indeed Votergate. I mean, this is just insane. We have huge numbers of votes being taken away from the president. We had boxes of votes for candidate Biden arriving all around the country at 3 a.m. in the morning. Post offices backdating November 4th to November 3rd. We had voters going in person to precincts only to be told they had already voted. I mean, this is absurd. We also had more voters than were actually registered. And according to the numbers, candidate Biden supposedly received 8.8 million votes more than Obama ever did. I mean, this is just by sitting in his basement. So,
With less of the share of black voters on top of it all, right? More black voters voted for President Trump than for any Republican candidate in the last 60 years. And still, supposedly, Biden beat Trump by, an insane amount of votes. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, it doesn't make sense. I mean, they had all of those millions of fake ballots that were actually picked up, that were confiscated coming in the port of Los Angeles. But who knows how many, missed the trail and actually made it into the country. Alex, this is a fascinating battle because this attack is not physical. This is an actual infiltration of our country and, of course, the censorship of information. It seems specifically designed actually to weaken the United States in many ways. And this is a very Eastern sort of philosophical warfare strategy to weaken your opponent before you ever overtly show your cards. And it's very interesting. It combines with the virus and the masks. And I want to talk about your perspective of where all this is actually coming from.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head, Michelle. I think the role of communist China here cannot be overlooked. They are the 800-pound gorilla standing in the corner, shrieking and hollering that nobody wants to talk about, but we all know is there, right? And they have now infiltrated every element of our society. They're literally in schools now, brainwashing children with these Confucius institutes, supposedly teaching Chinese culture, by which they really mean communist culture. And they have their agents crawling all over this country. They've reached the highest echelons of power. They've got Hunter Biden compromised. Goodness gracious, we know from his laptop this guy had partnerships with Communist China's spy chief, as he himself put it in an audio recording that was leaked. And so we would be very naive to overlook the role of foreign enemies in this warfare that's being waged against the United States. And it's not just communist China. The Russians are deeply involved, not in the way that the lunatic left thinks. I mean, this crazy conspiracy theory, put on the tinfoil hat that, Donald Trump is an agent of the Kremlin. It's absolutely silly. In fact, Donald Trump is, I think, the first one to seriously stand up to these totalitarian powers, certainly in my lifetime, with the possible exception of Ronald Reagan. And that's one of the reasons I think the elites hate him so much. And I think the crucial thing to understand here, Michelle, and a lot of people recognize the role of communist China. It's becoming very obvious. They're even involved in Black Lives Matter. The Venezuelan dictatorship is deeply involved. One of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, Opal Tometi, actually tweeted out a couple years ago a picture of herself hugging the mass murdering dictator of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and said on Twitter, it's so wonderful to be in a country with intelligent political discourse. And I guess by intelligent political discourse, they mean you kidnap your opponents, you kidnap their families, you torture them, and then you murder them. Okay. But the leaders of the Venezuelan regime have been bragging that they're sending what they call a Bolivarian breeze to the United States. And I think the key thing to understand, and this is what most analysts have missed, is that the partnership between communist China and the elites in the United States, the George Soroses, the David Rockefellers, the Bill Gateses of the world, is absolutely undeniable. We don't need to speculate. We don't need to theorize. These people have been out of the closet for decades about these issues. And I can give you certain concrete examples. David Rockefeller went over to communist China in the early 1970s. And you can go to the New York Times website right now. They still have it posted. In August of 1973, when he got back from China, he ran an op-ed in the New York Times called From a China Traveler. And you should read the whole thing. He concluded that the social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in human history. And they had slaughtered already at that point tens of millions of innocent human beings. The Cultural Revolution was already well underway. They were burning libraries. They were murdering professors. They were turning children against their parents. They were torturing dissidents. Anybody who thinks that's a successful social experiment has something wrong in their head and in their heart, and I think needs to be looked at very seriously by our law enforcement agencies. This suggests to me evidence that there is some sort of nefarious activity going on. And David Rockefeller actually later confirmed that in his own memoirs. He wrote on page 405 that he was proud to be conspiring, right? Conspiracy is a crime when there's a criminal offense involved. And I would say subverting the constitutional republic of the United States ought to be a crime and is a crime. There are legitimate political means to change things that don't involve conspiring with, as he put it, a secret cabal. These are David Rockefeller's words, to build a one world political and economic order. More recently, we've had George Soros openly and repeatedly explain this same thing. When he was getting the Globalist of the Year award, for example, in Canada.
He got the Globalist of the Year award.
True story. Yeah, right. And he explained that the communist Chinese government should own the new world order. He actually told the Financial Times similar things about a decade ago. He also said that communist China has a better functioning government than the United States of America. And all this can be verified. Okay. You've got Bill Gates sending love letters to Xi Jinping about how great their coronavirus response is and all the rest of it. And it goes right along with what we know from the Rockefeller Foundation. They put a report out in 2010 where they talked about a hypothetical future pandemic that would contribute to authoritarian control of the planet, and that communist China would be the model, and that they would require us to wear face masks, and they would require small and medium-sized businesses to shut down. And also that even after the pandemic faded, the authoritarian controls would stick and even intensify. So there's, I think, deliberate evidence that the elites in the United States and in the Western world, in London and Paris and other places, have been openly cooperating with the mass murdering dictatorship in communist China to overthrow the very foundations of Western civilization and of the United States government. Incredibly dangerous. There is now a revolution going on in this country, and it's in your face at this point. I mean, you have the biggest corporations in the United States openly funding Black Lives Matter, which is run by self-proclaimed Marxist revolutionaries. So we have a very serious problem on our hands, and if we don't get it under control, I can guarantee you we're going to end up like Venezuela. We're going to end up like China. We're going to end up losing our freedoms and our prosperity and all the other blessings that we've enjoyed in the United States over the last few hundred years.
Right, right. We're incredibly blessed. One of the most interesting things about your personal profile, Alex, includes the associations with every major news outlet, amazing books that you've written, along with some of the most accomplished international journalists in the world, and yet very prominent in your professional biography is the fact that you seek to glorify God in everything that you do. And I think this is a very important point to bring up with what we are watching and what we are seeing happening, because it's not just the CCP, as you mentioned. The CCP looks like it is being put up as the king of the hill, but we've got a lot more behind it. And I want to take a moment to view what is happening right now on the physical level through the eyes of the spiritual level.
Yeah, well, thank you, Michelle. And I think that is absolutely fundamental to understanding what's happening. I really don't think you can understand current events without looking at it through the lens of what the Bible explains. And the Bible explains some things very, very clearly. For example, in Ephesians 6:12, which is a verse that I use all the time, it explains that humanity, the planet, is involved in a giant cosmic war. It says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities and the forces of darkness and spiritual wickedness in high places. So the Bible describes reality as really a cosmic battle between God's kingdom and Satan's kingdom, the kingdom of darkness. And I think this spills into the physical in very obvious ways, very frequently, more and more right now. And it's not hard to see the dividing line. You have people who openly want to enslave and murder and kill and destroy and pillage and destroy freedom. And again, the battle lines are becoming more and more clear, right? The Bible teaches certain things about what is evil and what is good. things that are evil, according to the way God defines it, include murder, include theft, include lying, right? And we see now this incredible array of forces all over the world, including the Communist Party of China, including huge segments of the American elite that are literally opposed to every single one of these basic tenets of morality. And I mean, you don't even have to be a Christian to recognize that something is wrong with murder and stealing and things like this. And yet communists and communist revolutionaries openly seek to not just approve of these things, but to institutionalize them, right? They want to institutionalize thievery. They want to steal everything from everyone and then redistribute it as they determine is best. So it's a flagrant violation of God's commands. And this goes down through on every single issue, right? God says he created the male and female. And so now we see a concerted effort from the global elites to tell us that that is actually hateful, that is actually bigoted, that there's really infinite genders. Every child ought to be able to choose what kind of gender they want to be, and they can wake up and be a new one tomorrow. If they want to mutilate their genitals at taxpayer expense and remove their breasts, that this is all accepted. I mean, this is so crazy. And even just a few years ago, anybody would have recognized this as crazy. And yet now we see the institutionalization of this crazy anti-God ideology in the public school system, in the media, and on and on. So I think the key, the lens through which this needs to be properly understood is that there is a battle going on right now between evil and good, between God and Satan. God is going to be victorious. I can guarantee it. There is no question about it. So to the people out there who think that they're going to get a lot of power and a lot of money by being on the wrong side of this, I would beg you to come to your senses. There is no question about it. God has already explained what's going to happen. The deep state, as it's called today, is going to be absolutely crushed, and that is coming. It may not come in our lifetimes. It may not come for hundreds of years, but that time is coming, and it seems to me that time is coming sooner rather than later, because so many of the things that the Bible talks about that will be coming, things like this global satanic system of government and this mark that everybody's going to have to take to be able to buy or sell. 2,000 years ago when that was written, it just sounded absolutely silly. The idea that we were going to have a global government that would be able to stop anyone on the planet from buying or selling. Today, they're openly talking on national television. You have the Prime Minister of Canada a couple of days ago talking about the Great Reset, where we're literally going to bring in this global system that is going to have the power to prevent everyone from buying and selling. So that's the direction we're moving. And I think there's a lot of good people in the freedom fight who I don't think have connected all these dots, but I really don't think you can properly understand what's happening or be effective in the battle if you don't read your Bible and if you don't understand that there are crucial spiritual components to this battle that we're in, Michelle.
Yes, indeed. It's so important for people to take a step back and look at this big picture. When you look at everything close up, it's like, what's happening there? What's happening there? Well, why'd they do that? Well, where's that coming from? But what you really need to do is take a step back and look at the entire landscape. And you touched on the topic of censorship. And most people agree that withholding information is keeping someone else in the dark. So information equates to light. You put the light on the situation and you inform people about what is happening. What are the long-term implications, Alex, to the effect of the social media platforms, that the actions that are taking place right now in our country?
Yeah, great question. And the censorship is, I think, a crucial part of this whole operation. It goes right back to what we were talking about. The Bible teaches that evil prefers to do its deeds in darkness. They don't want their wickedness to be known to the public. They want to do it where they think nobody can see it. And so, of course, that translates into massive social media censorship campaigns where you're not allowed to talk about the fraud that's going on with the COVID hysteria. You're not allowed to talk about the fraud that's going on in the election, or you will be banned, you will be censored, you will be demonetized, you will be deplatformed, and all the rest of it. So there is a frantic effort to conceal the truth. And yet the Bible tells us the truth sets us free. And of course, it's referring to Jesus Christ, but truth is truth, and truth is always good. Truth is always important, and truth is an incredibly powerful weapon. In fact, the Bible tells us in Ephesians 6:18 that the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, which is ultimate truth, is our ultimate weapon. And so we shouldn't be surprised to see this fanatical effort to silence the truth. And it translates to smaller things like silencing the truth about vote fraud, silencing the truth about the elite's agenda. But it also translates to much bigger things. I have a good friend who was actually put into Facebook jail for 30 days for literally just quoting a Bible verse. And so what needs to happen is people need to pursue truth. In fact, God rewards those who seek truth, and this applies in all spheres. And there are some really good things happening on this front. I've been tremendously encouraged by what is happening with the ability to bypass the fake media. We've got new social media outlets that are popping up right and left. We've got people who are communicating with each other in person. But we do see the war on truth is reaching just fever pitch levels. And that we see it on social media. We see it in the establishment's propaganda organs, CNN, CBS, even Fox News now. I think it's tremendous that people are starting to wake up to the fact that that's controlled opposition. But we see it in the war on churches as well. In multiple states in the United States, for example, the governors are telling churches that they're not allowed to meet. There are pastors all across this country. In Southern California, some of the top pastors in America, John MacArthur, Rob McCoy, Jack Hibbs, they're literally being threatened with arrest for refusing to shut down their churches. Why? Because the enemy is absolutely terrified of truth. They don't want people talking to each other. They don't want people studying the Word of God. They want people in darkness, in ignorance, in fear, hiding in their basements so that they will willingly give up their freedom, so that they will willingly surrender what God has blessed them with. And, it's probably the most important part of this fight as far as a regular person is concerned is how do we find truth and how do we disseminate truth? And so in my journalism, my motto has always been Ephesians 5:11. I have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them and expose them. And we do that with truth. We reprove evil and we expose evil just by speaking the truth, by sharing the truth, by disseminating the truth. And I think that's one of the most important things that an average person can do is help get the truth out.
Right. Just shed light on the truth. And I think people think when you talk about God, you're some sort of a fanatic and, religious zealot, and the truth is this is the creator of nature and trees and earth and love and creation and inspiration and everything that takes you into the realm of happiness and joy and love and connectivity. And that's what creates. And what is happening here is we have a force that is, opposite of evil is live. It's actually against, God creates life. And this is our creator. And it's an incredibly strong realization that the angels are huge. And these aren't just, angelic little nice guys, wimpy, whatever, these are really strong warriors that are behind everyone here. You know what I mean? We have help. There's not just evil in the realms we can't see. There's a lot of angelic God presence. So when you surround yourself with that consciously and you recognize that every living creature, everything that you can protect, you are a God too, because you have that power to take away its life. A ladybug or whatever, when you kill a spider, you just took away its life. You were God, instead of putting it outside. And it may sound a little bit extreme, but I have a personal opinion that life, all of it should be, trees, are living beings and earth. And so when you really look at that, Alex, this is more about appreciating our earth and ourselves as guardians of the earth, and the fact that there is something here that is against God that wants to destroy it. When you see the murders, when you see the wars that are instigated, you see all of the grief, it feeds on that. And once we realize it's got no power, that's why it's afraid. That's why it doesn't want information out. So, but without information, people start to become fooled, and then they get angry, and they get sorrowful, they commit suicide, they provide the energy this thing feeds on. So when we take a step back, it really explains the whole thing.
Yep. Yeah, there's so much truth in what you just explained. And, speaking of the angels, the Bible is filled with references to angels. And so people who get scared, who get demoralized by what's going on, and there is an effort to demoralize and terrify people. Yes. The Bible tells us the Lord has not given us a spirit of fear. In fact, he gave us a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. So if you're feeling afraid, if you're terrified about what's going on, that is not coming from God. And on the subject of angels, we see intervention by angelic beings over and over and over again in the Bible. And to give you a sense of their power, one of the stories that's recounted in the Old Testament, you have 185,000 enemy soldiers from Assyria coming against Jerusalem, coming against God's people. And God's people pray. And what happens is God sends one angel, not a legion of angels, not an army of angels. He sends one angel, and that angel completely annihilates that army. So if one angel can destroy 185,000 troops, highly trained, highly disciplined troops that have amassed against God's people, what in the world do you have to be scared of, right? Satan is incapable of making a single move without the permission of God. And once you understand that God is sovereign, really, it becomes obvious that there's nothing to fear. God's got it under control. Don't worry about it. Fear is not a useful emotion. The enemy uses fear to try to deceive you, to try to turn you away from your purpose. And as far as being good stewards of the earth, God, right in the very beginning of the Bible, God actually tells Adam and Eve, "Hey, I put this planet here for you. Take good care of it. Name the animals. You guys are stewards of this planet." And that is one of the purposes for which God put us here and for which he created the earth. And so absolutely people have an obligation to take good care of it. And yet we see the forces of evil just absolutely intent on destroying everything that God has created that is good. The animals, the trees, the nature, people, love, goodness, light, truth, everything is marriage, family, right? All the things that God has created that are good are under total assault constantly from the enemy. But, we have a responsibility to understand this and to resist this and to show this to other people, to show love to other people. And, there's also the whole spiritual dimension. I mentioned Ephesians 6:12. Our enemy is not necessarily people who are deceived and are in Satan's kingdom. In fact, God tells us we should love our enemies. So these people are not our true enemies. In Ephesians 6:12, God says the real enemies are these spiritual forces of darkness, the spiritual wickedness in high places. And once you understand the world through that lens, I think everything starts to make more sense. All these things that seem unrelated, all these things that don't seem to make any sense, they all suddenly do make sense. And that is a very comforting knowledge and understanding that, everything's actually going to be okay. So
Yeah. Everything's going to be fine. And so for people because there are a lot of people that are afraid, the COVID, and then now President Trump's in jeopardy, and we've got, we can't say what we're supposed to be, what we think, we have to wear masks, or the police, defunding the police. I mean, all of this stuff. And it is, if you feel like you're alone, that is very frightening. But the truth is, the nature of the earth is you're not alone. And we were put here specifically to guard this beautiful Eden. That's what we're here to do. We're here to guard and clean the oceans and take care of the sea creatures and take care of everything on the planet, including the vegetation. And, the realization, everybody's like, what are we here for? That's our purpose. So stepping back, now we'll step a little bit closer into this, but I really wanted to, I knew you understood that big picture, and I really wanted to present that to everyone because you have angels all around you. Just because you can't see them, if you have a mission to do the right thing in love, then you are surrounded by really strong angels. So you just make that your mission, and you find out how things really start to fall into place. And if everybody does it, this thing will be gone in a snap. The problem is people don't believe it, and they can't let go of the thought that they're in danger and they have to say the right thing, otherwise, everybody's going to reject them. And then they fall away from the protection that they naturally have. Now, Alex, I want to ask you something. The president has said several times, they are not after me, they are after you. What does he mean by that? And who specifically are they?
Yeah, he's exactly right. And Donald Trump is not the primary enemy of the establishment of the deep state. Really, the people who put Donald Trump in the White House are who they're after. So Donald Trump has a very good understanding of that. He was kind of an aberration, a monkey wrench in the gears of the system, if you will. And they are absolutely furious about it. Not so much because of Trump, but because the American people ignored their propaganda. Every single major newspaper, every single one of the major fake media outlets did nothing but demonize Donald Trump in the 2016 election. And yet the American people gave them the proverbial giant middle finger and said, no, thanks, we'll take that guy. Right? He said America first. He said down with globalism. We'll take that, please. And so when Donald Trump talks about they, and he's also made a reference to the deep state, I think the nature of what he's talking about is it's critical that we understand this. And I'm actually looking for a copy of my book. I just released a book literally in the last couple of weeks here. Let me see if I have a copy. Well, I don't have one within immediate reaching distance, but it's called Deep State, the Invisible Government Behind the Scenes. And so I spent about 200 pages explaining who is they? Who are they? Right. And so I break down some of the key organizations involved. There are the semi-secret groups. You've got the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg meetings, the World Government Summit, things like that. Then you've got the actual secret societies. You have the Skull and Bones Society at Yale. You've got the Bohemian Grove in Northern California, where these weirdos get together. 2,500 of the most powerful men on the planet get together in front of spirits, and that they burn what they claim is an effigy of a child at the feet of this 40-foot stone owl. You're like, what? And if you don't look at that through a biblical perspective, you're just like, well, what in the heck are they doing, right? How would a secular person explain that? I don't know. And so, I focus on that. The second part of the book is how they operate. What kind of strategies do they use? What kind of deception do they use? How they brainwash our children in the public school systems? How they use mass immigration to undermine the concept of nation state, to undermine national cultures and national identity. So they've got all these different tools that they use. I also have a whole chapter in there about how communist China became a superpower with the help of the global elites for the purpose of building this new world order. And then towards the end, I talk about the spiritual component of all this, which is just as important. So if people are interested in learning more about that, I've done a lot of talks about it. You can find some of those still on YouTube. You can get a copy of the book. If you're interested, go to libertysentinel.org. That's my website. And then /donate. And there's instructions right there. You can send a donation. I think it's like $19, and I'll put a copy in the mail for you. But again, I've written a lot of articles about this. And I do think it's important to put names and the people involved down for everybody to see. These are real people with real names, with real agendas, who have been pretty clear about their ultimate objective. They call it creating a new world order. And unless Sun Tzu put it really well. He said, if you understand yourself and your enemy, you'll win every battle. You need not fear the result of 100 battles. And so if we're going to free ourselves from this, and I do still believe it's possible, it's going to be absolutely critical for us to understand two things. Who are we as Americans? What is our true history? What is our true heritage as Americans? And, you can start off just real simple. Read our Constitution. Read our Declaration of Independence. These are documents that are still at the foundation of our nation that your average American has no understanding of, and that's a tragedy. So we need to get back to an understanding of who we are as a people if we're going to preserve our system, if we're going to preserve our liberties. We also need to have an understanding of who the enemy is. And for simplicity's sake, now we call it the deep state or the insiders, but it really is kind of a global network of individuals who intend to make slaves out of every person, every surviving person on this planet. They have this fanaticism about reducing the number of people on Earth. Why? Well, because man is made in God's image. And so we know that the enemy hates mankind, hates individuals. And I think if you really want to get deep into the deep state, the crucial element of understanding the big picture is once you understand that Satan is their commander in chief. Once you understand that, you understand what we're really up against, and then I think you can become an effective person in this fight.
Right. That's where we are right now. We are up against Satan versus God. It's been predicted. We knew it was coming. We are in the middle of it right now. Satan is an energetic force that feeds on despair, murder, destruction, war, anything that makes you feel horrible. That's what it feeds on. So the people that we're up against are feeling that way. They feel that's empowered. They're empowered by enslaving the people around them. So don't believe that these people are all happy, because when you're in the energetic mist of, you're afraid for your life constantly unless you say the right thing, you're not living a happy life. You're not living the life that we were created to live in this beautiful, wonderful place to protect it. I want to bring up as our final topic, Alex, the bottom line, which is going to be that our election is going to be decided this year by the Supreme Court. And basically, anything that goes in front of the Supreme Court, whether it's a law or a decision, anything that they agree to hear, their function is to determine whether that is indeed constitutional. That's it. And the criteria for a constitutional election is actually very clear. So what do you think is going to happen here?
Well, I think there's a few scenarios that we could see, Michelle. There's obviously multiple court cases working their way through the system now in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, in Georgia, in Wisconsin, and Michigan. And I think all of these cases have merit. All of them are going to be working their way up through the system. And I think the Supreme Court is eventually going to get involved. If John Roberts decides that he doesn't want to get involved, as Sidney Powell put it, I think he needs to be impeached. I've been suspicious of John Roberts for quite a while. I don't know whether they have some kind of leverage on him. But there's a lot of very intelligent people who've been wondering these things for a long time. But there's a few scenarios that we could see before that and that could play into that. One of them is the fact that the Electoral College is who actually decides elections in this country. People think that, well, the media has declared Joe Biden president-elect, and so it's over. No, right? Nobody's president-elect until the Electoral College gets together.
And did you notice his office, too? The office of the president-elect for the first time ever?
Yep. And so we're being played here. And what's going to happen now is these states are going to have the state legislatures. Actually, in Article 2, Section 1, the U.S. Constitution designates state legislatures as those responsible for selecting electors. Now, most states have delegated that responsibility to voters in statutory law, but the legislatures ultimately retain that authority. In fact, the Supreme Court ruled on that just again recently during the Bush versus Gore fiasco of 2 decades ago. They said, yes, state legislatures control who will be delegates to the Electoral College, and they can take that power back from voters at any time they want. And so if we have massive and overwhelming evidence of fraud, as we do in Pennsylvania, as we do in Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, et cetera, then those state legislatures have a duty to step in and say, no, we're not going to send electors based on a fraudulent election to the Electoral College. So they have several options here. Now, there is a concerted effort going on right now to get some of these legislatures, and all it would take is 2, to send Trump delegates to the Electoral College. They will be meeting on December 14th and casting their votes, and then those votes will be opened in Congress on January 6th, where the winner will be announced. Now, there's another possibility here, Michelle, and that is that some of these states' elections were so corrupt that they're just not able to send delegates. They can't certify a slate of delegates. And so in that case, we could end up in a situation where neither candidate, Trump or Biden, ends up with the 270 Electoral College votes required to get a majority and win the presidency. In that case, the Constitution also has a mechanism. It goes to the 12th Amendment. And what happens then is the U.S. Congress will make the decision, but not based on how many people are sitting in the Congress. What happens is each state will get one vote. Their delegations will get one vote. Most states are controlled by Republican delegations, and that means Donald Trump as long as he can keep the Republicans in line, he will still become the president if Congress ends up deciding the election. So there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that could play out, but I think Donald Trump still has a very, very good chance of ending up in the White House for another 4 years.
Yes, wonderful. Alex, this is always amazing to have you on this show. Please tell everyone where they can find your books, read your articles, and how everyone can follow your work.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. I really appreciate you and what you're doing. My personal website is libertysentinel.org. Sentinel is SENTINEL. Most of my books you can buy right there. I'll send them to you directly. It's libertysentinel.org/donate, and you'll have instructions there. You can get most of them on Amazon as well if you're interested. But I've been trying to steer people away from Amazon because it's an evil company, and they're going to be getting more and more books burned in the days ahead. Also, I'm a senior editor at the New American Magazine. If you don't subscribe, you can go to thenewamerican.com, subscribe to the print magazine, or even just to the daily headlines. Those are free. I write for the Epic Times and a whole lot of other publications, so you can put my name into any search engine and you'll find that. And thank you once again for having me, Michelle. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for what you're doing, and really appreciate it.
Mr. Alex Newman, international journalist, best-selling author, founder and president of libertysentinel.org. For the Industry Experts panel, I'm Michelle Holliday at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com.